Where did you go to college?
Boston University.
Okay, and what are your degrees in?
My undergrad degree is in theater, and my master's degree is in communications, and that I did at the New School in Manhattan.
Okay, where did you work before this job?
Where did I work before this job? I worked at a lot of places before this job. I'm old.
Okay, like where?
Right before this job, I worked at a social services agency called Jewish Family Service. And I did their marketing and promotion. They do senior services and adoption and things like that. Most of the work that I did in my career was in New York and was in either in advertising, where I did program development for advertisers, like television movies for Procter & Gamble and General Foods doesn't exist anymore, Kraft. And then I went to work for a company that distributed programming for advertisers. So I always had this kind of special niche in advertising, which was that it was always advertiser developed and paid for television programming. So that's most of my career in New York. And then I also did later some nonprofit in Brooklyn in economic development before I moved here. So I'm in kind of like all over the place.
Okay, so what made you come teach at Penn State Harrisburg after being in the field?
Well, I started teaching, I was lucky enough to get some adjuncting in New York while I was still working on my PhD, which I didn't finish, I should say, in all honesty. And because I had never really thought about being a teacher, but my job, the job I had at that time was cut to part-time because things were rough in television and advertising. And so I got a chance to teach at Marymount Manhattan College, and it was more fun and fulfilling than I had known or imagined. So I kept doing that, and then I was at FIT for 5 years as an adjunct. We moved back here. I'm from here. We moved back here about 8 years ago, specifically because it was just too expensive to live in New York, and plus a kid, and the whole deal. But I thought maybe I'd get some adjuncting work and do work in industry or something. And I did actually work at an advertising agency when I first moved here, and that closed like 6 months after I got here. And then at Jewish Family Service. But I had applied for some teaching work when I first got here, and I didn't hear from anybody. I thought maybe I would. But like Hack, I never heard from. But I thought that would be easier to get in than here. But I just was I think I was sort of lucky that I was like looking around for jobs, and I found that this job posting. So it was a little luck that got me here. But I didn't think I would be able to get a full-time teaching job, so I felt very fortunate and happy that I got it.
Okay, what's the most rewarding thing about your job? I guess we could start with teaching.
Well, I think we're here to help students, so, when I feel like I'm helping, I don't always feel like I'm helping. I think that's the most rewarding thing, when people graduate and get back to me and say, I got this job and thank you for teaching me this stuff and I do get those periodically. I just got one last semester. The guy said, I'm still, thank you, I'm still using those press release tips you gave me and blah, blah, blah. Because otherwise, what are we doing it for? And so it sometimes feels like that you're just kind of like talking into a vacuum. And you don't know whether you're having an effect on people. But when they tell you that they have, then you feel like your time has been well spent.
Okay, what about being in the field?
Well, I had a lot of fun in advertising, especially at the beginning when I started working like in the 80s when there was still like money and things that people would throw around, and we get to go on trips and lunches and stuff. So that was always fun. And television programming is fun, and I worked on projects, and I like that. But it got harder and harder as the business got more and more in trouble. as the years went on, and so it wasn't as much fun as it started. And I think one of the differences, aside from the fact that I think it's more valuable to be a teacher than to be making some crappy television programs, I always had to report to people that, you know, bosses are tough, and even though I have bosses here, I have a lot more independence in terms of what I want to do in the classroom. Like, nobody says you have to do this specific thing. So even though it is a big institution with a lot of bureaucracy, but I'm in the classroom, I feel independent. And that's the first time in my life as a job that I felt like I got to do what I thought was the right thing to do, you know, so it's nice.
What advice would you give someone trying to be successful in advertising?
Well, I think that it's not just, I think that the advice is to be not just to pigeonhole yourself into one thing, like advertising, you know, and the stuff that I've been teaching in my classes, I think is more geared toward integrated marketing, and that you need to be able to have a variety of skills, and more skills than you used to have, right? When I first started, you could get pigeonholed into one thing or another, but now they're asking for so many skills, and, you know, we were actually just talking about this, right, in the last class, that, you know, I worked most of my career without ever having to have graphic design skills. I mean, I had to work with graphic people, but I never had to do it myself. Now I see it's in all the jobs, right? And so I think that you have to be flexible. And I think you have to have a broad familiarity, at least, with a lot of different facets of the marketplace and the job skills, because they're just, you know, you never really know how much you're going to have to do. And in some places, you're going to end up being like the only person that does what you do. And so you have to be able to juggle and put yourself in a lot of different roles.
So what were one of your greatest stresses?
My greatest stresses?
Yeah, when you were working out in the field before you started teaching.
Oh, before I started teaching. Well, I think it's when you're working in jobs like this, the deadlines are scary always. You know, you have an ad, it has to get to someplace by a certain time, and, you know, what happens if you forget it, or it's not finished, and, you know, nobody's going to wait for you, right? The television show is going to go on, and certain ones I worked on were like every week, right? And so if I were doing TV Guide advertising or things like that, right, it was the constant struggle to make sure that I didn't just usually work on one project at a time, we were working on a couple of projects. So deadlines and juggling responsibilities, right? Being able to multitask and get everything done. Everything's on a different schedule, right? So kind of, I always sort of keep all the balls up in the air. I think is pretty stressful.
When you were younger, did you have like a specific person you looked up to?
Besides my mom?
Yeah,
Well, you know, I wanted to act, so I think most of the people that I was looking at were probably actors that I thought were really talented, and the kinds of things that I do, which was, like, I mean, I did a lot of musical kind of stuff, so people that you don't even know who they are because, you know, I'm so old. People like Angela Lansbury and other people who are really, you know, successful in musical comedy and stuff, I guess.
Okay, so what made you get your graduate degree in communication if you wanted to act?
Okay, so when I got to New York, I moved to New York right away after I graduated. You gotta have a job, right? So, I mean, I was very fortunate that my parents helped me out a lot. But I still had to work. So, you know, if you want to be an actress, you kind of go two different ways. You could either be a secretary or you could be a waitress. And I knew I was going to be a really lousy waitress. Seriously. Like, there's like, no, you can't really see me be a waitress, can you? I mean, people would annoy me. So, So I was like, okay, and I actually went to Catherine Gibbs, which I think still exists, which is like an old-time secretarial school. And they had a special program for 8 weeks for college graduates. So I learned how to type better than I remember. We didn't have computers yet. And so I had a typewriter, but so I learned to type and take something called speed writing, which is sort of like shorthand, because my first job was as a secretary to a chairman of an advertising agency. And he didn't write his own letters. He would dictate to me, and I would like write them. So it's really kind of old school. So anyway, when it sort of became apparent to me, and I was working in an advertising agency, that I kind of liked it, and I could see myself as having a career in advertising. I never really made this conscious decision that I wasn't going to act anymore, but it just kind of seemed like there were other things I could do that were easier. So I wasn't acting, and I was talking to my dad about this, and I went to this thing. Boston University's program was called a professional training school, which really meant that we hardly took anything else but acting kind of related classes. So my father basically said, well, you don't know anything, so you really need to get a master's degree. So I, and he was, and as I said, I've been very fortunate in my life, and he said he would pay for it. So I got a master's degree in media studies. Still not kind of really knowing what I was going to do, but at least it was like sort of in the field. And I had some teachers there that were actually grad students at NYU at the time in the PhD program there in communications. And so I hadn't really planned to do that, but it got more interesting to me as I went along, and so, I don't know, it just sort of happened. Really, I didn't really plan a lot of things. I always think I tell people to plan better than I did. I just sort of found myself places somehow or other. So, and then, like I said, I got this opportunity to teach, and I'm like, wow, I like this. So, and teaching is, for me anyway, a really good combination of my skills, because, and things that still make me happy. Like, I don't get to act anymore, but, and I wouldn't say teaching was 100% a performance thing, but it kind of is, at least, like, I don't think everybody thinks about it that way. But you're up in front of people, and you need to be engaging, and you need to, connect with people. So it makes me feel I still get something out of that. Plus then I get, the studies and the intellectual stuff, and also use the work that I already did in my career. It wasn't a waste of time, right, that I did 25 years in television marketing. So it seems to me like kind of like the perfect combination of the things that I like and that I've done.
Okay, so what are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? Well, I think it's going to be like kind of, it's kind of cliche to say you're most proud of your kid, but I think I am most proud of my kid because he's awesome.
Mm.
And being responsible for somebody else's life is a big deal, So I'm proud of the way he's turning out, and I think I'm proud of my students. I think when I really try to keep in touch with people and see what they're doing, and so when I see they're doing well and things are good, I feel really good about them. I think they're not, that I didn't waste my time either, right, with them. So I guess that's it.
All right, I think we're good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
It's just in time, too, because my phone